Plato believed that most people do not see reality directly. They see reflections of it, images, opinions, appearances, and they mistake these for truth. This was not a metaphor about ignorance. It was a warning about attention. Plato understood that what people focus on eventually shapes what they believe. In his allegory of the cave, he described people chained in darkness, watching shadows projected on a wall. These shadows moved. They were entertaining. They were familiar. And because the shadows were all they knew, they were taken as reality itself. Plato's insight was unsettling. The problem was not that people were deceived. The problem was that they preferred the shadows. Truth required effort, discomfort, uncertainty. Shadows required none of that. This distinction matters today more than ever. Modern life is saturated with images, endless visibility, endless commentary, endless distraction. What is most visible is not necessarily what is most important. But the mind begins to confuse the two. This way of thinking warned that societies decline, not when they lack intelligence, but when attention is misdirected. When spectacle replaces substance, when noise replaces meaning, when popularity replaces truth. In such conditions, vice can be sold as virtue, and virtue can be dismissed as weakness. This was not framed as moral failure. It was an observation about incentives. If attention rewards the loudest voices, those voices will multiply. If status comes from visibility, then visibility becomes the goal. Not wisdom, not character, not understanding. This is how illusion sustains itself. People are not forced to look. They are encouraged to enjoy what they see. This way of thinking recognizes that most people will defend the shadows, not because they are evil, but because the shadows feel safe. They are familiar. They require no inner change. Turning away from illusion is uncomfortable. It disrupts identity. It challenges values. It raises questions without easy answers. Plato knew that those who attempt to point toward reality are often ridiculed, ignored, or attacked. Not because they are wrong, but because they are unsettling. This is why knowledge rarely spreads virally, and distraction does. The concern here was not fame or politics. It was education of the soul. He believed that without training attention, people would confuse stimulation with meaning, entertainment with fulfillment. In such a world, serious matters feel distant, complex issues feel boring, immediate pleasure feels urgent, and long-term consequences are ignored. This leads to a strange inversion of values. What matters most receives the least attention. What matters least dominates conversation. This does not happen by accident. It happens when systems reward distraction more than understanding, when speed is valued over depth, when reaction is valued over reflection. There are no simple solutions. there are guidelines. That freedom begins when attention is reclaimed. When individuals learn to ask not what is popular, but what is true. This requires patience. It requires resisting the pull of constant stimulation. It requires the courage to sit with complexity instead of fleeing into spectacle. Most people will never leave the cave entirely. But he believed that some could turn around, and that this turning is the beginning of wisdom. The lesson is not to reject the world. It is to see it clearly, to recognize shadows for what they are, and not confuse them with reality. Plato's warning remains relevant because the cave did not disappear. It expanded. And now, the shadows are brighter than ever.